Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Greetings from Nova Scotia, eastern part of Canada. I hope you're all having a great day so far. So today, we're going to be doing another series of our usual webinar, which focuses on topical issues affecting Africa as a whole, and how collectively we can speak about it and see what are the ways forward. So today's topic would focus a lot about entrepreneurship and innovation as catalyst for the growth, economic growth and development in Africa. And today we have a very diverse panel, individuals who are esteemed in their profession, people who have like a reputation and who have done a lot of work in their field. So it promises to be an exciting 2 hours, and we would take it gradually. So we have a comment section, so feel free to leave your comments in there. And we would typically start off with an opening question, whereby we'll go around across the panel for them to get their perspectives, and then we can then jump into some other parts of the questions. We would also take questions from our audience intermittently. So typically we leave it to the end of the webinar, but this time we want to take a different approach. So hopefully it might work out better for every one of us. So without much ado, I would like to start introducing our panel, our speakers this afternoon, this morning, this evening, depending on wherever you are. So I would like to first of all start off by introducing Adebisi Jordan. So Adebisi, who is the CEO, Executive CEO, Initiative for Africa, as well as Info Africa. So Adebisi, hopefully you are online. Thank you so much for joining us. And feel free to unmute yourself, Adebisi.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ken, and thank you for having me. I just have connection issues, but I'm joining per video. Thank you so much.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. So I also want to introduce Professor Gregory Ibeh. Professor Gregory Ibeh is a seasoned entrepreneur, someone who is very prominent in the entrepreneurship industry in Nigeria, as well as the CEO and the owner of Greg University, Uturu, Abia State in Nigeria. So Professor Gregory, welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. How are you doing today? And welcome everybody. Thank
you very much, Prof. I would also want to introduce a good friend of mine, Professor Douglas Wallace, who is the Ocean Chair, MIOPA in Dalhousie University, as well as someone who is very prominent in the ocean tech industry, as well as entrepreneurship, and a huge advocate for entrepreneurship and innovation in Africa. So welcome, Doug.
Hey, nice to be online with everybody. Thanks, Ken, for the invitation to participate. Looking forward to this.
Thank you, Doug. And then the last guest, I'm not sure if she's here, but my co-host, please kindly keep tab of that. I'm not sure if she's here. Mbasa. So Mbasa is the founder of Seafood Festival in South Africa, and someone who is very prominent in the entrepreneurship world in South Africa, and a strong advocate of women in entrepreneurship as well as youth. So Mbasa, are you online? Hopefully she can join us. I don't seem to see her on here. Maybe she's having connection issues. But it's okay. I'm sure we might as well just jump into, okay, I think Mbasa just joined us. So just give her. Mbasa, can you hear me? Do you want to mute yourself? Okay. Maybe she's having some connection issues. Okay, all right, fair enough. So we might as well just kickstart the event today. So I would like to pose the question, which typically is the reason why we're here today. Entrepreneurship is a big thing. It's increasingly recognized as one of the solutions to various socioeconomic problems, in both Africa and the global economy as a whole. It has also been described as one of the cornerstones of poverty alleviation. and also a very, one of the ways to achieve both economic and social independence amongst states and countries. So in light of that, there's a huge push towards, promotion and, encouraging people to go into entrepreneurship, not just the youth, but everyone typically. So I would like to start with you at DBC. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? Because I know you've done a lot of work around entrepreneurship with what you do with the Initiative for Africa, which is really great, what you guys are doing, empowering the young people and others into, going to set up their own businesses and even to support them while they grow the businesses. So at DBC, I want to start off with you. What are your perspectives and thoughts about that?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you at DBC. Go on, please.
Okay, perfect. Again, thank you so much, Ken, for organizing this insightful conversation. And thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. And I would like to thank as well Professor Douglas and our professor from Nigeria for sharing this platform as well. As Ken just started introducing me, maybe quickly I can tell one or two words about my work. Initiative for Africa, based in Paris, and we are working mostly in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of private sector promotion and development, as well as advocating on different development issues. And then for 5 years now, we have been working on those different areas with different stakeholders, public and private as well, on the region. I would just like to start quickly with two key opening remarks, okay, around the topic. The topic is how entrepreneurship and innovation can be catalyzers, can be drivers of economic growth on the continent. I would like to stop on 1 or 2 minutes on the idea of economic growth. I believe that our distinguished professors will have time to go deeper on those points, but I would like just to stress that for the last 20 years, okay, our continent, the continent African, has acknowledged an economic growth. We remember the shift, the narrative shift from the hopeless continent to the hopeful continent. From the economists, this has been really stressed, and a lot of medias and institution and international community praised this economic growth trajectory. What I would just like to stress is that the 4 key drivers of this economic growth on the continent for the last 20 years. And among those, can you hear me? Somebody is asking me to talk in my mic, into my mic.
I think we can hear you.
Okay. Then I can continue. Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. I would just like to stress that, first one, growth on the continent during the last 20 years has been mostly, one of its drivers has been the export of a lot of raw materials. I mean, oil, cocoa, gold, and others materials. That has been one of the structural driver of the economic growth of the continent during the last 10, 20 years. Second one, it has been investment in infrastructure, especially through debt, okay? There is a vivid debate around debt on the continent, but for the last 10 years, especially, the continent has get a lot of debts, especially from China's, and this has been something that has been a driver, especially investment through debt in infrastructure of growth on the continent. Growth, when we consider the macroeconomic statistic and the figures, macroeconomic figures. Okay. Third driver, it is the industry of services. especially in telecommunication and financing services. And the last one is private sector, I mean, entrepreneurship and private sector, but mostly in trade and services. Then this is broadly the state of the growth and the drivers growth of the African continent by the moment we're talking. And we will have the time to also talk about how we can envisioning this in the post-COVID area. And my second round of remarks is around entrepreneurship and innovation. For working on this area for a couple of years now, what I can say is that the essential entrepreneurship in Africa is a livelihood entrepreneurship, not a growth entrepreneurship. Okay, characterized mostly by what we can call a day-to-day entrepreneurship. A man who has just graduated but not having a job, but just doing like, you know, a small job, a small business, you know, to maintain its family and to just have an income, some incomes to live on the day-to-day basis. That's one aspect of entrepreneurship on the continent today. Second aspect is the informal aspect of entrepreneurship. In a lot of countries, the informal sector contribute even to 95% to growth, to wealth creation. Okay, and that is something that characterizes entrepreneurship on the continent. And the third phase of the entrepreneurship on the continent is the low tech or even no tech, you know, entrepreneurship on the continent, as it is mostly based on trades, services, import, export. It is not necessarily an entrepreneurship that is mostly driven by innovation. Then my question, as we are having this conversation, is what kind of economic growth should we envision for the continent at the moment we are talking and facing the challenges of the continent in the context of this COVID-19 area? We will have time to talk about this. And in the context when the world is, or the global economic narrative of the world is changing, in the context when the continent needs to create more wealth to face the closing of borders and the global protectionism that is the new wave of protectionism that is coming onto the world. What kind of economic growth and what model of economic growth do we need? That's for me one of the key questions. I hopefully think we will try to find some question too. And the second axis of the conversation of the question is what model of entrepreneurship do we also need to face the human challenges, the job challenges, the community challenges of the continent, of our societies, of our nations, and how do we articulate or how do we re-articulate this economic growth and this private sector entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem in order to achieve a human and a people-centered development. And that's the few words I just have as introduction. And thank you again. And I hope the conversation will help to shape some ideas and some solutions. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, DBC. I think you made some excellent points there. And, you know, some of the webinars we've had in the past has also spoken about what are the opportunities for, you know, Africa as a continent post-COVID, because in as much as COVID is like, it's a crisis, but there are opportunities as well, which has, you know, come out of it. but it's all about the continent positioning, herself to be able to harness what those opportunities are. I particularly like the point you made around, we have a lot of day-to-day entrepreneurs who typically went into entrepreneurship as a means of survival, to feed their families. So how does that impact the sustainability of what they are doing? Because as someone, like as a business person, you and I understand that decisions you make on a day-to-day basis actually, affect how sustainable your business is. But we'll get into that. We'll just want to, hear from the other members on the panel, like on their introductory remarks around, entrepreneurship and innovation as a catalyst for economic growth and development in Africa. So can we hear from Professor Doug Wallace? So Doug, if you want to unmute yourself and let's hear from you.
Yeah, so hi to everybody from Nova Scotia, which is on the east coast of Canada. And at this time of year, it's pretty nice, right, Ken? It's pretty nice.
Yes, it is.
Day today. So, my background is I'm an ocean scientist. I'm a chemist. I'm an ocean scientist. And so I'm a professor at a university. And I'm interested in, my interest in this topic came really from my scientific interests. The oceans themselves, I think as many of you probably are aware, are under threat globally from all sorts of issues. Overexploitation of resources, climate change, coastal development, and all sorts of issues. And this is a global phenomenon, obviously also very real threats all around Africa. The ocean impacts our lives globally as well through climate change and things like that. But it's also obviously an incredibly important source of income and livelihoods for people all over the world. And again, also all around the coastal regions of Africa. And there has been a growing emphasis on looking at ocean resources and how we work with the ocean to sustain what is now called a blue economy, an economy based on the resources and services that the ocean offers. And the emphasis is on a sustainable blue economy. So maybe a quick thing I need to mention is, why does some guy living out on the east coast of Canada, why is he joining in on this session, which is primarily focused on the economy and innovation and entrepreneurship in Africa? And the real reason is because the oceans, and also the atmosphere, but the oceans, they connect us. They really connect us. Something that impacts the ocean, for example, in the Gulf of Guinea, potentially impacts the ocean off Nova Scotia. And climate change impacts us all. And again, the ocean plays a big role in that. So the ocean actually is an area where economies and also economic development has the potential to impact everybody, including what Canadians do impact Africa and vice versa. So, my personal opinion is, I think shared by many, is that we do need to, the ocean is a source of potential source of economic growth. But if it's going to be human-centered, as Adebisi just said, it's got to be done in a sustainable way in which we do not damage the health of the oceans and overexploit its resources. And to me, this means first and foremost that we have to do things well and in an informed way when we develop the ocean economy or the blue economy. So that means we have to know what we're doing. We have to know what we're doing, and we have to measure what we're doing, and we have to have a sense of what the impacts are of what we're doing on the future economic potential and health of the ocean, whether it's the fish in the sea, or the climate and things like that, pollution, coastal resources, threats of flooding, all these sorts of things. We have to know what we're doing. And to me, the way we know what we're doing is through technology. We do need technology to tell us what's going on in the ocean. And we need fairly advanced technology to do that. It's not I think for ocean economy development, I don't think the no-tech or low-tech solution that Adebisi said, I don't think it necessarily works. I think increasingly high-tech solutions are needed both for economic growth and also for sustainable growth. So that implies education, but it also implies that we need, and I believe very firmly that the driver for that will be private sector development, and also NGOs, but private sector development all over the world, including in Africa, which has the trained employees, but also people who can make a sustainable living on the basis of that training. And so that's my interest, you know, in why I got involved in this. I've been learning a lot from Ken about the realities of ocean business in Africa. But my background to this comes from my scientific interest and my belief that sustainable use of ocean resources comes from an informed and therefore a relatively high technology approach to the ocean. And that approach can benefit from private sector development and growth of private sector to actually implement that. Is that okay there, Ken, for an introduction?
Yes, thank you very much, Doc. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think there's that whole emphasis when we speak about the oceans and some of the challenges around climate change. That also creates opportunities for entrepreneurship, you know, because think about some of the innovative solutions which we would need as we navigate some of the challenges we're having around ocean tech, and of course to benefit, you know, reap the benefits of the blue economy, which is something you and I have discussed a couple of times. So, you know, it's high time we started looking into that area. You know, there's the education piece and then there's the technology piece. But we'll still get back to that, Doc, sometime in the conversation. So we would like to hear from Mbasa, whom I think she joined at some point. Mbasa, can you hear me? If you can hear me, kindly unmute yourself and, you know, make your opening remarks.
Hi, everybody. How are you doing, Ken? Thank you for...
Very well, thank you.
How are things over there? The weather's good?
Yes, very well.
All right, my name is Mbasa Javu. I am from South Africa. I am a founder of a seafood festival in South Africa, which is one of its kind. And I believe I'm one of the people who pride themselves in being the leader innovation. So when I started preparing for this particular conversation, I took a look at Africa as a continent just solely and what would catalyze economic growth. The first thing that came to mind for me was migration. So migration does definitely come with various challenges and things like that. But if we actually focused on it, there's a lot that could come from it. One, we could fill major market gaps through migration. We could have various subject matter experts from our neighboring countries filling those gaps if there's a lack within that particular country. Secondly, we could promote trade and investment and bring innovation within Africa and just start with Africa. And there would be a lot of skills and knowledge sharing between both the host and the original country. So if I were to make an example with my seafood festival, what we did is that we had a strategy where in 1 month we would focus on solely Mozambique way of preparation of seafood. So we would incorporate the various flavors of preparation of seafood from Mozambique, and that would be an attraction point to current South African residents, but also to a tourist who wants to visit South Africa, because then we would sell South Africa as a world of culture, not just South African culture, which is a great selling point. And also it would spark an interest in South Africans possibly having an interest in traveling. I think Colin needs to mute himself. Thank you so much, Colin. So if we incorporate those skills and knowledge as South Africans, as Congolese, and as generally as Africans, we would then also spark an interest to travel within the continent itself. So that would be one of the good things that come out of migration. And also it would really contribute to a transfer of knowledge and enriching of our civilization. So that was the first aspect. I thought that was the first section where I thought it would catalyze economic growth within Africa. The second point was imitation, where we learn skills from each other and we learn the various ways businesses operate and we adopt that, and we basically in for share as the various countries, and that I think would definitely assist in economic growth, because we as entrepreneurs are at the leading edge of innovation. We are actually the backbone of economic development for each country, and the countries depend on us to create jobs, and they understand the importance of how entrepreneurs enhance the standard of living of the people, and they assist with the development of the country. So I think those 2 points were my top two, where it was imitation and also migration definitely being catalysts to economic growth within Africa. And then once we've done focusing on Africa, then we can take a look at the country at large. But within Africa, definitely migration and imitation.
Right. Thank you very much, Mbasa. I think those are very valid points. The interesting one is the migration piece, which you brought a whole new perspective into that. And I think I agree with you in terms of, some of those knowledge sharing, where when you have regional, people moving within the regions and all of that, different countries, people can bring some of those skills, which I think is really important. And of course, the innovation piece as well. When you spoke about innovation, what you're doing in terms of the way you've developed new seafood products and looked at different markets specifically, that's how the whole innovation thing, you bring it. So, but we will still come back to some of your points, and thank you so much for that. So I would like to hand it now to our esteemed professor, Professor Gregory Ibeh, who has a presentation he would want to share with us today. So I'm going to share it on the screen, and then I would hand it over to you, Prof, to...
I think, Ken, let me do an intro first, because
okay.
I see the trajectory of the discussion. I want to thank everybody who has spoken before my very self. Before I go in, I want to thank Professor Wallace. Professor Wallace, of course, my university is having an MOU with your university with the computer science. I'm happy you came on board, because when we talk about the ocean is critical to every form of development. But we have a lot of things. I served President Obasanjo as the consultant on maritime education in Nigeria in the Ministry of Transport. So I have a lot to share with you on that. And then also I thank Basa from South Africa about what she wants us to do about migration. But have it in mind, the African Union has a body called NEPAD, which had a lot of clout during President Obasanjo, where cooperative advantages are brought into NEPAD and shared among African nations on success story. So this, I believe, that will help this discussion and help you, so that from here we can have the African Union and NEPAD to go back to address these issues. But let me go to the issue of today that brought us to this discussion, entrepreneurship and innovation. When we talk about entrepreneurship and why it was gaining ground from the field of management, of course, we appreciate all management experts in this world that have given birth to a lot of field of knowledge. So the most recent being entrepreneurship. But we have a lot of things to borrow from the West and the West, I mean the developed nations. For us that schooled in the US and have to do a copy, we have to adopt a slogan in Nigeria: creative destruction. Whether it is pandemic, at time, it is a creative destruction. At the end of the day, it will bring out some things that will be innovated and that can lead the world to go through. So a creative destruction will always come. So pandemic and COVID-19 will give us what we call creative destruction. So we leave it for the experts to start to digest on what they have to do. But let's look why entrepreneurship has taken this fair. Entrepreneurship has taken this fair because it is the only hope for the poor man. It is the only hope for a street urchin, somebody that has no way to go. The beginning of entrepreneurship is the idea. And it has led the West to develop rapidly. By 1960, Canada was they were using firewood everywhere, but you can imagine from 1960 to today, they are the world best. It's a quiet environment. Everybody seems to be good to go because they are over-dependent on government will not solve the problem, but individuals innovated. So they came over whatever developmental challenges they had, because the people who are faced with challenges came out with diverse details, diverse ideas. And when you must scan your environment. You must scan your environment. So why it's getting ground is that people scan their environment. And as you scan your environment, you will come up with an idea. And that idea, you will start to see, is it practicable? Can it solve this problem? That's how people have solved all problems that confront them in this world. That's entrepreneurship. And when you now have this idea, you start to think of innovation. So that's why this topic is key for my continent, Africa, because we borrow a lot from the world. So entrepreneurship is key to any development in Africa. And I do know that that is a consultant to government and also working with UN agencies, I've toured around Africa and I see comparative advantage. Don't forget, entrepreneurship has a lot also to do in the second stanza of it, if not the most important, the cultural background of the people. The culture is important. Like she said, if those people that live near the ocean need a lot of studies from the Al-Hassan University, from Professor Wallace, to know what we can do to innovate further. In Nigeria and in Africa, what is confronting us there is the pirates. The pirates is chasing businesses away. How many percentage of our trawlers, fish trawlers, are owned by Nigerians or Africans who go to international waters to fish fish for food? So you can imagine Bosa says that he's doing a lot of things on value added. So innovation can also be said is value added. When it comes to cultural thing, you do value added thinking. So I still believe that Africa has a lot to borrow from Professor Wallace's discussion and whatever he has found out, and why your country, especially sitting in the east coast of the Atlantic. So we have a lot to borrow. So we will go into this discussion and then identify the key areas, but Africa needs a lot because they are surrounded by our west with Atlantic Ocean, and then the other side is Indian Ocean, if I'm correct. And then you see the Nile River up. So all these things and all the tributaries in Africa are keeping all the waters warm. And whatever that, according to Professor Wallace, when the heat within the tropics happens, it gives back to the West a lot of sea-going issues like the tsunamis that we've already known about. We've already known about. So we need to look at what ocean can give to African countries. If you look around Congo Brazzaville, the waterfalls that empties into the Atlantic Ocean in Congo Brazzaville can give the entire Africa electricity, but we abandoned it. We are not doing anything about it. So we have a lot to share among Africans, but we need to develop the concept to move beyond what discussion we're having now and move it to African Union and get the African Development Bank to really come up with it and say, what do we do to use the outcome of this discussion to deepen entrepreneurship and then to among our youths in Nigeria. I will tell you all that we are doing in Nigeria and what I did as the course of the discussion goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your contribution. I think you made excellent points. You know, a couple of them stood out for me. I mean, you did speak about ocean tech, which is something I'm passionate about, based on, you know, working with Doug and some of the capacity building projects we are working on between Canada and West Africa. But I think one thing which really stood out for me when you talked about innovation as a means to solve problems. So there's a school of thought that looks at it from the perspective that Africa has, if I might say, there are a lot of problems we're dealing with in Africa. And obviously, though that might not be something convenient, but that also creates an opportunity for people to think, people to think about what are some of the innovative ways. We have the advantage of borrowing from best practices, where it has been done in some other parts of the world, and then tailoring it to our own local realities with our culture in mind, which is like what you just spoke about, Prof. So I agree with everything you said, and I think you made excellent points, and I think we'll definitely come back to this. So what I'm gonna do, we'll just take on like follow-up, questions from there. So Adebisi, this is for you. So I know you did mention, one thing I know your organization does, IFA, you've spoken about the fact for more engagement between stakeholders. So like academia, entrepreneurship sector, the government and what have you. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you think this engagement should look like? Do you think there's a sufficient engagement at this point in time, or do you think there needs to be more? And how do you think this should play out? Adebisi, if you want to unmute yourself, please.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much, Ken. Thank you for our panel. I want to thank our panelists for their introductions and for their points. Before maybe taking your point and your remark, I would just like to get back to one or 2 points our speakers stressed, especially our professor from Nigeria. Your point around entrepreneurship, the need for Africa and for all young Africans to be more entrepreneurs, to have more entrepreneurship initiative is really valid and really critical. And for me, where we also need to take the conversation from is what kind of entrepreneurship do we need in Africa? Is it an entrepreneurship that allows young Africans to live or to survive, maybe to survive? Or are we seeking for a growth entrepreneurship, or an entrepreneurship that lead to human-centered development? And that's maybe a few points I would like to raise, and I will be happy if Professor Greg can also give us some light on this point. That's a critical point. The other point is around economic growth. On my opening remarks, I was just explaining that economic growth in Africa is not, unfortunately, is not necessarily synonymous of development growth or human-centered growth. Then for me, where we need to take the conversation from before talking about around how different industries or how different stakeholders engage and work together is, for me, a model conversation. What model of economic growth are we searching for, or are we shaping? Okay, and I think that it is probably the response and the answer to this question that can help us shape effectively what kind of collaboration or what, and how do we articulate the action of academia, private sector, youth, institution, etc., etc. And for me, maybe, and in the light also of the new narrative, the new global narrative, and the new African narrative due to this pandemic we are also living in, for me, maybe we need to rethink three key aspects, okay? Try to find 3 key answers to 3, I think, critical issues when it comes to what kind of economic growth model are we searching for. And for me, one axis is around priorities. I was talking about the huge priorities that has been given to infrastructures investment. That's not bad. To export of raw materials and some specific industries. But I also believe that if we need to rethink economic growth to make it synonymous of human development or Africans, populations growth, if you want to have an economic growth that led to a human-centered growth, we maybe need to reshift our priorities in terms of wealth creation. And for me, in terms of priority, and that's for me one critical point, there is a conversation we need to have around how we do invest in health, space. That's a conversation that is really critical at the moment we are talking, because we are amid a crisis, a pandemic that is spreading on the continent, and we are facing the fact that in a lot of areas and remote areas of the continent, people cannot afford health. How do you want, or how do we want people to create wealth if they are not in good health? How do we want people to create growth, to work toward economic growth if they are not in good health? Then I think that in terms of priorities, for me, in terms of great reset, the World Economic Forum has this expression called Great Reset in terms of reshifting our conversation, our model in terms of economy, in terms of policies. I think that for Africa, we need to reshift our priorities in terms of investing more in health space. This is for me one critical conversation and one critical axis we need to explore seriously and vigorously, and with what I can call radical audacity, if you want to rethink and reshift the way we are creating growth, economic growth, and the way we are willing to reconnect economic growth to development growth. This is something that is critical. In terms of priorities, I may also have 2 points. It is education and human capital. Our conversation is also around entrepreneurship and innovation. The other day, I was having an interesting conversation with some experts, and I was just sharing with them, look at Canada, for example. We have Professor Doug. Look at United States, look at France, look at Europe. The youth today, they are educated to face the challenges of the 4th industrial revolution. Look at African youth. How are they, what are their education? What are the skills they have been taught? For me, if we need to face, or if we need to invent tomorrow's economic growth, I think that this is a necessary conversation in terms of what are we investing in our human capital, in our youth? What are we investing in terms of skills, in terms of competencies, in terms of vision of the world, in terms of capabilities to reshape, to create wealth and to create growth? For me, in terms of priorities, that is something we need to face as well. And in terms of priorities, I may have some other points, but I think that I will stop with my third point around the priorities to rethink the economic growth. It is territories. When we think about development and economic growth, we focus on what government, central governments produce in terms of wealth. I think that maybe in terms of great reset, there is a momentum to rethink how territories, how our local territories produce and contribute. Okay, my sound has been cut off.
Okay,
yeah,
go on.
I was talking about territories, sure. Then I think that, yeah, in terms of economic model, there is a conversation to have on how we decentralize growth, production, and growth creation. And I think that in terms of priorities, if we are able to rethink and to reshape
a conversation around these three axes: health, human capital, skills, and territories, decentralization, maybe we can create a platform to think on how we connect or articulate policymakers, private sectors, entrepreneurs, international agencies to produce this growth and this, I insist on this point, this human-centered growth, a growth that leads to human and development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adebisi. I think I like your points, especially around the priorities. You know, what are our priorities, and you know, how can we ensure that even though we might start off with, you know, looking into maybe the health side or the human capital side, how can we ensure there is a balance so we don't like allow one part of it to suffer? So I wanted to throw this one out to Professor Gregory real quickly before I have a follow-up question. Prof, how do you think we're doing in terms of priorities? Are we setting our priorities right in terms as a continent? What do you think we should be prioritizing? I know, like, for example, right now, the whole COVID thing is a challenge. So like Adebisi mentioned, people need to be in a good state of health to be able to, you know, engage their potentials fully. But aside that, do you think we're doing well in terms of investment in human capital? And how do you think we can improve upon that?
Adebisi, I understood your questions, and it's good to also inform you that you identified priority as key for the African leaders. I don't think any governance will work effectively if they don't do a national planning program. For you to even operate the small business you have, you must have a plan. So every country must have a plan in order to achieve greater results. And one of the things you cannot go back to tell the African leader is that he should leave what he's doing and then face health. Health is important. It has spat them on their faces to know the deficiency that we have over period and up till now. So you will see that they are the focus. They wait for issues to happen to that point before they can now drive resources to that end. I hope, like I said, creative destruction. What pandemic has done is that African leaders must do something so far as the health of their citizens are concerned. When you look at the World Health Organization in terms of the life expectancy, in Nigeria it's about 54. When I did a paper, when I was doing my master's program, I did on life expectancy in the whole world. Whereas Japan was #1, America was running second on the line. So anyway, but that is for another day. So Nigeria is 54 years life expectancy, which means we have not invested much on the populace in terms of healthcare delivery. So it is difficult to find people. In some villages, you see people of 54 years being the oldest. So that is critical. So this pandemic has created opportunity that they will have to pay attention to the healthcare needs of Africans. But let me now go on entrepreneurship, back again to the issue on our table. No meaningful thing can be done in Africa except you build the capacities of the people to understand what entrepreneurship is all about. We've never had it so good until when we had Obasanjo, who listened to us, my boss, President Obasanjo. When he sees your thoughts and opinion, he goes for it. Whereas in the US and the developed world, entrepreneurship is part of a curriculum that starts from primary school. In primary school and secondary school in Canada and the US and the developed world, manning and attending a baby is in the curriculum, for example. A child in secondary school is taught how to take care of a child, a born baby, and is given a mannequin to go home with this mannequin that has recorded the things and the sensor right inside, and the teachers will tweak it to get this lady, this little girl who is in secondary school, to wake up per minute per second to do feeding on a mannequin. And then the child understands what being a mother is and how to take care of a little child. That training will never go out of that child when he becomes a mother. If you go to the curriculum of Nigeria, we changed it. But it was getting too late for Nigeria to build that curriculum all the way down and start from primary school education. So President Obama says, what do we do now? Now. 100,000 youths were leaving the university education and doing NYC, or the voluntary compulsory service. What we did was to create a training among these youths and then also do a backward integration of the curriculum in all the universities and all the higher education in Nigeria so that they will understand what is entrepreneurship. So it was made a 6-unit course. Whereas, oh my God, some calls. Whereas some African nations, I go on UNESCO meetings in Togo and everywhere. I work with UNESCO. And I work with the Nigerian University Commission on a lot of events that has to do with Africa in quality control and assurances. When you go to certain countries in Africa, the agency saddled with giving curriculum to higher education in their country rests on the Ministry of Education, not in a body that supervises it like in Nigeria. So it creates a lot of trouble. So it is the wish of one man that takes precedent. My advice is that we as Africans need quite a lot of work to do, because human capital development, what you don't know, you don't know. If I teach entrepreneurship, I'm a professor of entrepreneurship, and at each time I see year 2, I teach from year 2 to final year. Year 2, as soon as you come into my class and I face you with the challenges of tomorrow. Gentlemen, ladies, listen. In 3-4 years, you are leaving this institution, and you are going to meet another 2 to 4 million Nigerians out there without job. So what do you intend to do? Everybody starts getting scared. I said, if you want to help yourself then, and you want to be a master of yourself, you want to be a job creator, you want to create wealth yourself, this entrepreneurship training is now critical for you to listen. I have built people over, I've graduated 4 sets. And then all these 4 sets, the first thing that I get as feedback is that they always depend on what I taught them, and the 2 skills that they pick from their year 3 and year 4, you must pick 2 skills at my university. So without training and knowledge giving, it is difficult for people to imbibe, even to the local person. You said here that 95% of what propels every economy is entrepreneurship. Yes, it's a small business. If you go to the International Council of Small Business, which the Small Business Association of America is a member, and the Small Business of Canada, they're all members to it. The body is over 70 years old, if not 80 years old, preaching entrepreneurship all over the world. They have propelled and made it possible for everybody in the developed world to appreciate the fact that, why must I sit idle? I can consult ABCD to give me a training, and that I will depend on that training to enrich my own natural talent. And with my natural talent, with a preparation on top of it, I'll become a wonderful entrepreneur. If you don't teach somebody anything on entrepreneurship, it's a problem. So what Africa needs to do is to widen the knowledge of building the capacities of youth on entrepreneurship. It is critical for us to know and make it a burden onto the African Union or the ECOWAS body or the regional bodies to move in and have all the youth educated. And it is based on the education of acquiring entrepreneurship that the people will think of the box. And when you want to think of the box, the next thing you do is you start innovating. Because if you don't know how to make shoe or do value added, then it's a problem. I give you one small example today that's happening. Nigeria has all the oceans around, had all the rivers around the community, same with Africa. And then we tout ourselves as being fish growing nation. But most of the fish that goes to Nigeria for sale, catfish that is roasted, comes from Thailand. So what does that mean? It means that Africa has not, we've not imbibed even the local technology to ourselves by knowing that it can lead you to entrepreneurship, can cover you. You can depend on entrepreneurship and become more successful. American government created AGAO, the agricultural program for export to come from Africa. How many African countries, except Ghana, that is benefiting from it, and somewhere in Senegal and Ivory Coast that is sending palm oil here? So if we have the opportunities, we have our arable land, palm oil is harvested everywhere. What are we doing? We do nothing. So we need to go back to the drawing board and imbibe it in our education curriculum from primary school, secondary school, to the tertiary institutions. After that, the local people that have not been able to go to school, had the opportunity, there must be training to them so that they will appreciate the fact that they need to use entrepreneurship as the key indices or indicator for growth. And it will, the manifold gain Africa will get from it will be unprecedented. But majority of our youth are sleeping, majority of our government are sleeping, they are not doing what is required. But this opportunity of discussion will help the body, either us or few other people that are listening, to make a paper and present it where it is necessary. And then if United Nations and the West want to really help Africa to develop, they should initiate such moves to get critical mass of our youth and prepare them on entrepreneurship training. I know that some few corporations in Africa keep shouting, we're entrepreneurship, we're doing this, certain SME loans are free to go. But at the end of the day, they dissuade the child, the youth, from accessing this loan because either the one that is free interest loan is too small to even start selling bread on the streets. So people run away from it. So they will either, because of the documentation problems in Nigeria, the banks could give loan also to people to use in Nigeria, and because there's no adequate record. That's why America is always fighting with Africans. You have to have a full documentation of who is who in your country, so that even if you borrow the person's money, you can always use the BVN to get the tracker. You can get the fingerprint. The person have national ID card. You can follow up the person wherever he is, so that he will not run away from his responsibility of paying money that will give the person without collateral. So you register everything you do. There must be a record of you. So these things have hampered the opportunities to borrow money. So the bankers are on one side. Instead of them helping that this thing will work, they allow it to go. So they use collateral to shorten you for what you do. And how many youths have collateral? All they have is an idea, and they've gotten knowledge, and the knowledge is ready to be carried along, and they've gotten the skills, but there's no money to prepare them. So the SME growth in Africa still remains at a low ebb because of lack of patronage. I hope that, of course, if you need all my inputs from your body, you should feel free to contact me. I am 100% ready to support everything. Thank you.
May I?
Thank you very much. Yeah, okay. Did you have something to say at DBC before I, okay, go on.
A comment around what Professor had just said. Thank you so much, Professor, for the point, and I really appreciate your plea for training and for education and skills. And I also appreciate some organizations like the Tony Elumelu Foundation in Nigeria who are doing a really great job in terms of filling this gap, this skills gap. But I also wanted to add, if you allow me, that even if we have the most trained youth or young people in our countries, there is, on my point of view, three major obstacles on our environment.
Please speak well.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to add that there is three major obstacles on our environment in terms of fostering entrepreneurship that doesn't allow entrepreneurship to really spread and to support and sustain growth. First one, it is the policy environment. We can have the most trained youth, but if we don't have a comprehensive policy environment in terms of transparency, in terms of ease to settle an enterprise or to run a business, in terms of support of administration, I think that probably this is the way we are willing for entrepreneurship to support and to drive economic growth. It won't be really effective. The second point is around the financial environment. You mentioned it, Professor Greg. For young, there is a lot of talent, a lot of young entrepreneurs full of talent, but because of full of ideas and even trained, but because of the financial environment, the inability for banks, the unavailability of financial tools, of effective financial tools and mechanism, a lot of ideas or brilliant business ideas are not enforced to support our economy's growth. Third point is around the market, the scalability markets, and the ability for a business to go from a point A to a point B, the availability for a small application, I don't know, to become the next Google or the next Facebook. And I think that those 3 points and those three issues are really, really critical. And we can even have the most trained generation or the most trained youth in our countries if the regulatory environment, if the financial environment, and if the market environment are not fitted. I believe that the way we are envisioning entrepreneurship as a driver for growth, this hope will be fulfilled. And I also have a complementary point, and maybe this can be a divergence between us. From my small and modest experience, I believe today that for African continents, what we need more to absorb the youth that are coming onto the market of employment every year, and all the youth that are willing to be like to contribute to wealth creation. It is less making them entrepreneurs than having a real political will in terms of creating a policy-driven model, like creating manufacturers, states, I believe, a local or regional champions that can absorb those youth that are coming onto the economic market. There is a lot of a real push in terms of we need to have a lot of young youth doing entrepreneurship. This is good, but everybody cannot be entrepreneur, and it is a journey. More than training, there is, you know, the guts, the audacity, and a lot of, you know, personal skills, and more than skills. Even it is a spirit being entrepreneur. You know, I also run a company. I know a little bit what it means. Is more, beside of skills, there is the will, and there is some the inner abilities to be entrepreneurs. Then for me, beside of those environment and regulatory reforms we need, I also believe that the model we need to explore more in our countries should be a model more driven by our states in terms of taking responsibility to create more companies, support more companies. I can give you one or two examples. In the dragons, the Asiatic countries, one of the model they have explored, a lot of them have explored. I'm thinking about Southern Korea, for example. It has been at a certain moment of their history, economic history, they have said, okay, we are going to push this industry, textile, cars, for example, and we are going to sponsor local champions like Samsung, like Kia, and those major local champions have settled some ecosystem that has led a lot of entrepreneurs or small business or SMEs to be created around those major local champions. I believe that maybe this is something we need to explore for our continent, instead of encouraging all young people getting out from university to settle a small business. Then those are just a few comments I just had, and I would be happy to hear about all others panelists' comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, DBC. I think you made some wonderful points there, especially the bits around ecosystems as well. Because I know there's a school of thought that looks into, you know, instead of spreading out too much and just pushing everyone into entrepreneurship, how about you focus on what are your competitive advantage as a country, you know, and then work with private sector to, you know, leverage on that. But I also wanted to acknowledge a lot of great points which Prof made before now, you know, talking about, you know, capacity building, our, you know, we need to move from a reactive approach to more proactive approach, education as well. I like what his university is doing at the moment, Gregory University, where there's a lot of focus on entrepreneurship in the modules, you know, ensuring that everyone understands the A to Z of entrepreneurship, not just, you know, going into entrepreneurship as a way to survive or as a way to feed their families post-graduation. But I think the point which I wanted to speak about, Bas, I know you have your hands raised, but I'll come back to you after Doug, because I just wanted to talk about the capacity building parts and the knowledge and skills which Professor Greg spoke about earlier. So Doug, I wanted to throw this to you because I know the Ocean Tech Capacity Building Project, you know, it talks about the focus around knowledge and skills-based training, you know, as a way to develop the expertise needed for these entrepreneurs. So because aside some of the issues around access to capital, which we spoke about, but then there's also that issue around knowledge and skills. People need to be skilled. People need to like understand the index, because that's the first step in terms of bringing up innovative ways to solve some of these problems. So what are your thoughts around that, like the knowledge-based part of it and skills-based?
Well, I think, you know, first of all, the point's been made, you know, how important it is for young people to receive training in entrepreneurship, maybe training really more broadly in business skills, right? Because I think Abadasi's point there that not everybody has the character or the personality to be an entrepreneur. I'm not sure if I do, actually, you know, but Ken clearly does, right? You know, and so, you know, everybody's got a different character, but everybody needs to understand, and I think that's true of university professors too, how to run a business, you know, because many research groups are like a small business. So I think, yes, young people today, and of course, I mean, Africa has such an amazing wealth of young people. I mean, that potential is there. Vast potential, the best potential in the world, and but they're going to have to make their own careers. They're going to have to make their own careers, and that training, you know, that is now in like Canadian and US curricula, very, very relevant. You've got to know how to handle money. You've got to know how to handle authorities and difficult ecosystems. But you also have to have technical skills if you're going to really make a difference. And so I think it's the combination of the technical skills, the advanced training, coupled with the business/entrepreneurship training is really where the future lies for many young people. And I really would hope to see more curricula develop like that. It's really encouraging to hear about the curricula developing, and I'm familiar with what Ibeh is doing. You know, it's very, very exciting, but at least with respect to the ocean, many existing curricula are focused very much on the science of the ocean, and very few have the business and entrepreneurship training. And I think for the future, people coming out of those programs are going to come out looking for a job in government. There's very few. Looking for a job in a university. There's very few. And really, we need to change the training. And I think that's something that where Canada, together with West African countries, can work really effectively together. The other part, though, is the structures that Abadisi also mentioned. I'm kind of really interested to hear what Mabasa says about whether that seafood market really created an environment where different entrepreneurs and different businesses could come together, but maybe she wants to talk about something else. I don't know.
Yes, Mabasa, so over to you. I also wanted you to also talk about like how inclusive you have seen the whole entrepreneurship environment in Africa, you know, in terms of women and all of that. Do you think it's been inclusive enough? But I think you might want to touch on Doc's question first. Mabasa, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here, Ken. Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm still here.
Okay.
What I wanted to touch on that the professor touched on was that there are a lot of things that we need to learn and unlearn. I 100% agree with him in regards to the education, where we lay the foundation in regards to entrepreneur. We won't all be entrepreneurs, but at times like this, it would be a very handy skill to have. It would be a very good second option to have, should it be that you cannot do the employee thing. But also there are a lot of things we need to unlearn as a continent. For example, in South Africa, if you have a baby, you can actually get money from the government of 500 Rand. So then we create that culture of dependency. So we can't have a culture of dependency and still try to promote entrepreneurship. So there's a lot of things that would also need to be unlearned, a lot of things that would have to actually be re-looked at in order to drive a culture of entrepreneurship. So in regards to around entrepreneurship and in South Africa and females, it's quite a struggle. Because it's quite new, you know, a lot of people who are currently in the industry, it's a lot more caveman and it's a lot more dominated by males. But I think we've done a lot of groundwork, and we're sitting at a year 2020 and things have changed. So it's definitely looking better than what it was before. Yeah. So that was just the comment I wanted to add around the learning and unlearning various things before we get to a point where we can actually drive entrepreneurship.
So just before you go, Mabasa, I had a quick follow-up question before I come back to you, Doc. What about the inclusive part of it? Do you think so far we have a fair participation of females in the entrepreneurship space, you know, in Africa? What do you think? Are there things you think we need to do better? Because I think, you know, there's that piece around being inclusive. I think it's very important to have that, knowing fully well that some countries like Kenya, women are at the forefront of growing the economy through their businesses. So what do you think?
No, definitely. We could definitely do a lot more work. We could definitely empower women with the various skills and the knowledge that they'll need to be in the forefront. And also not to restrict them to particular industries, because there's this stigma and mentality that you can't have a woman in the mining industry, which is not necessarily true. So if we open up all possibilities and empower them and give them the knowledge and the opportunities, because most times it's not just not the knowledge, they do have the knowledge, they do have the skills, but the opportunities are not presented to themselves. And also the equality around the genders, where a male would actually get more opportunities because the woman is at a disadvantage of having to be a mother and having to be a nurturer and a caregiver, whereas the opportunities should be equally spread out throughout both genders, and then they should be awarded on merit, not on the sex of the individual. So there's definitely a lot more work that could be done within the gender-based look at the things.
Okay, so I think, Doug, you had a follow-up comment?
You asked exactly the question I was going to ask Mabasa. So thanks, that was the question and the answer I was hoping to hear. So I don't have any more.
Okay. All right, so we've moved past the hour. I wanted to quickly take some of the questions which participants, and if you have a question or perspective, please kindly raise your hands, and I will see how much of that we can go through. So I want to look through here to see what some of the questions are and see. So I think someone asked the question, Kirsten asked the question, so what are the barriers for women? Is childcare and financial support with this not an enabler to assist? So that was a question from Kirsten. So I don't know if anyone wants to tackle that. So she was asking about what are some of the barriers we see for women. Is childcare and financial support with this not an enabler to assist? So that's one question. Let me see if we have other questions coming from here or perspectives. Okay, I see Dr. Philip Idewo. Dr. Philip, do you have any contributions to the conversation so far? Dr. Philip Idewo, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Ken. I'm learning. It's very interesting listening quietly to all the experts in the field. So in terms of contributions to the debate and discussions, no. So I just sit back and keep learning.
Right, great. That's fine. That's perfect. So I mean, we've said a few things. Okay, I think I have one more hand. So I'm just going to take one more question, and then we move to the next, question or the next line of discussion with the audience. So I have Daniel Nadion here. So Daniel, if you want to ask your question or make your contribution, please.
Okay, good day, everyone. Thank you, CEO Active, Mr. Kenneth Oguzie, and thank you all the guest speakers for the insightful discussions. It's been quite interesting, and I'm learning a lot, from the experts here in the house. We're talking about entrepreneurship, and I believe this topic is a topic of the time. What we all need to tap into and scale up. Entrepreneurship. We as a nation, our Africa as a continent, because we are focusing on Africa. Entrepreneurship is a very key thing for each and every one, each and every citizen of Africa, because entrepreneurship is the driver of the economy, just as it's been stated on this, on the flyer for the topic of today. And I want to thank Professor Greg, for the light he threw there, as entrepreneurship being an added and and a value-added innovation. In the country where you have a population, of 180 million to 200, as Nigeria population stands out, and you have a lot of people living below poverty level, entrepreneurship is key to scale up the living condition of everybody. And that is why we the participators and players in the industry need to push in whatever quarter, whatever we need to do to make sure that our population starts up entrepreneurship programs, start up what will benefit them, what will be able to make them start up one business or the other. But I want to take us back to what the discussion that the first comment Professor Greg made, life expectancy. But I'm not going to focus on life expectancy now. I'm going to talk about the statement Jack Ma made during the pandemic, during the peak of the pandemic, which he said that the highest gain or highest profit each and every one of us will make this period is staying alive. Our life is the first investment or the first profit we'll make, which is tied to what Professor Greg talked about. First of all, a person who needs to start entrepreneurship needs to live first. You need to have good health in order to start up entrepreneurship. So going to the topic we are discussing today, first of all, we make sure that the population are healthy in order to start entrepreneurship. And secondly, we now move to the topic, which is entrepreneurship. Like we have said, entrepreneurship is key. It is said that the GDP of a nation is directly proportional to the amount each and every citizens make, or you can redefine it to say the number of entrepreneurs that is available in the nation, because most of the countries all over the world live on tax. They live on a proceed from tax. And if there are no entrepreneurs, there will not be any set of people or organizations to tax, because the big organizations we see today started as a very small business. So if there are no businesses, there won't be there won't be tax. Government won't be able to get tax from anybody. And that is now the reason why entrepreneurship is now the key. So what should government do in order to make sure that this entrepreneurship is taught all over, to make it a compulsory thing? For me, I choose the journey of entrepreneurship because I know beyond our education and our academics, the practicality is entrepreneurship. Before we talk about the innovative aspect, because you need to start up an entrepreneurship venture before you think about innovative approach to scale it up. So entrepreneurship is a very key thing that government need to look into. So my question, and where I was thinking we should all point at, which is Professor Greg also mentioned that aspect, is the training aspect, helping the young people who are going to school now to understand that after school, if Mr. A or Mr. B did not start up a business, there won't be a place for them to be able to work when they finish. So therefore, they need also to be part of the employers of labor. And you start by painting the picture of the future to them. When you paint the picture of a future where after your degrees, studying abroad and everything, and you are waiting to get a job somewhere, and you're not thinking entrepreneurship, time come and go, and the job prospect has not been achieved, and you are waiting and whiling away time. Why not take up entrepreneurship? So the painting of the picture, the future picture to the young people is what is needed. Also, from the government side, government need to create loans. They need to create access to fund, which is what the Western world and the first world nations does. By the way, I'm an advocate of the first world mindset in third world nations. And what does that mean? First world recognizes the place of entrepreneurship and the place of making sure that the young people and the youth, access funds for entrepreneurship at a very low level, at a very low interest rate. Sorry, at a very low interest rate. This is what Africa need to come in to be able to breach. Interest, the place you can quickly access loan before we start having the emergence of some new companies that gives loan, quick loans, but the interest rate is still high. If you go to the bank before, even up to now, they request for so many documentations and all of that, and at the end of the day, the interest rate is choking. Government need to step in to make sure that young people, after having imparted the knowledge and the need for each and every one of us to create a business, they need to come in and provide access to funds, access to loan for young people to thrive in starting up business. But the key factor is young people understanding that the role of entrepreneurship is the catalyst for economic development. And I will rest it here while the discussion continues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for what you made very good points, and I think it just slides perfectly into the follow-up question, which I wanted to start off with Professor Greg Ibeh, which is around government. So obviously there's that whole discussion around entrepreneurs feel like government, especially in our region, they're not getting a lot of support from government. So things like access to capital, which, Daniel, you alluded to, interest rates, and infrastructure. But then there's another school of thought which feels that, entrepreneurs are not harnessing the little government is providing them. We've heard people speak about that, you can't keep blaming the government. There might be other ways. How about, being innovative in terms of working with what you have on ground instead of focusing on what some of the issues are? But I'd like to hear from you, starting off with you, Prof. Prof, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think our government, they are doing okay? What areas do you think there might be room for improvement?
Thank you. A lot of things are going on in my mind from what Ambassador said and DBC said. If permit me to go a little bit backwards. What you hear from our continent is borrowing money from China. All of us are syndicates, and we signed the protocol for United Nations Office of Trade and Development. And I find it difficult to see African nations taking the mandate of UNCTAD to their various countries and implement it through the Ministry of Commerce and Industries. If you check what UNCTAD stands for, the developed world, Europe uses it, a lot of countries uses it, and then they use it to promote entrepreneurship and development. How many items or products do we import from China? It's everywhere in Africa. We are import dependent. How many of these companies in China are training our people, are investing money in my continent, Africa, in order for us to develop? The answer is zero. So all our head of state and governance should implement the United Nations Office of Trade and Development UNCTAD program against all manufacturers of products that are imported into Africa. It will cut down and develop the total GDP by getting a lot of youths to be trained on those things they produce, who uses it, who repairs it. So you see there's a total lack of, there's a dumping ground. Everything they bring there will end up after 6 months, your money goes. And the continent seems not to care about insurance. So most of these things are never insured. So it goes bad and you throw it away, you buy again from China. So they give you substandard goods So this is one aspect that can promote the continent's entrepreneurship by implementing UNTAD. But let me go a little again to women, because Bossa was saying about women, and you asked a lot of questions about women, and Prof also Wallace wanted to know about women. You see, the issue of women in Africa, when you ask a woman to go and bring collateral, is he going to bring the collateral of his or her child to a financial institution? The answer is no. So there are limits to certain things. And then you know that if you help a woman set up a small business, like our mothers, who are dependent on selling akara on the street, and then selling articles in order for us to go to school or to feed. So you see that he needs little or no amount of money to keep on going. So any money you give to a woman, the money transmits or goes back to helping to solve and feed the children first. So women are critical to the field of entrepreneurship. And then let me now go back to also DBC. Training in entrepreneurship, also to Bossa, mustn't end up at the academic institution. Must end up in academic institution. We have all the developmental agencies running around Africa that they are putting XY amount in development. Can they continue to give us a rollout program of community to community or town by town where they are building capacity of women on entrepreneurship and that of the youth? Because many people did not go to school in Africa. That's why we started what we call the resource center. We're trying to build it, and it's to be funded by African Development Bank, so that they're going to do it as a resource center. This resource center we started in Nigeria, in Ekiti State and Osun State. And then this resource center is where you check in, and by the time you leave this center, whether it is 3 months or to 6 months or 18 months, depending on intensity, you will pick a skill for yourself. And you understand the intricacies without going to formal education. So this is one thing that is lacking, and our people sit at home. So sometimes the blue and white collar job will not pay. The only thing that pays is a knowledge of entrepreneurship. So that's why it's important that we as a continent should come together with all experts and make a way out for ourselves, so that our governance will depend on well-researched issues and opportunities that are there, so that we will talk to them and have them to implement things that will work. And your question, the last question you asked, I don't know whether I've been able to address it, but just note that whatever a government is planning and whatever they want to deepen entrepreneurship, they should make it purposeful. They should realize that they have a mandate of their people to change the situation on ground that they met. Most of them gloss over what they met. They gloss over what they met. And they also live with the same way they met it, because they have failed to imbibe the culture of total change. This is the only aspect that our governments need to know, that you need to depart from the old and come to the new, which is total transformation. And again, that's why I refer to President Obasanjo a lot. When we started the reform program, I said, when a country continues to do one particular thing over a period, it comes to a stage where they need to do a replan and change to the new system. Any person, be it family, be it government or company, that doesn't look at their vision and objective and review it as the day goes by, it is always difficult for them. It is always difficult for such government to move as per development entails. So all African leaders should sit back now and transform and reform the old ways of doing things to the new ways of doing things, so that they can move Africa continent forward.
Thank you very much, Prof. So I'm just going to take some quick questions and comments. So in the interest of time, if you want to keep it to just 2 minutes, that would be great. Then I can take concluding thoughts from the other panelists. Njenje, I think you have your hands raised. Do you want to make your contribution or your question? Please keep it to 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. So on the topic of capacity building and this innovation, as an entrepreneur myself, we have to think about when we are trying to enable, especially the youth, we try to enable the youth. And as we all discussed here, a lot of the youth, you go through the formal education system that we have, especially in Africa, does not really emphasize or give the option of the fact that when you're done, you should think of entrepreneurship. So everyone come out with the idea to get a job. So as all of you have emphasized the fact that we need the mindset shift, where the government and the policies or the emphasis should be on the youth or graduates having the mindset of being able to venture into something of their own. And another thing that I wanted to add was the financing. A lot of time we talk about when it comes to entrepreneurship, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, we need capital. We need capital and we need the government to give us funding. Yes, it is very, very, financing is so critical. But at the same time, you can have all the finance you want. If you lack that management skill or the skill, the entrepreneurship skill, the money will not do you any good. So what is needed is to enable, to put a system in place to equip those who want to go into entrepreneurship or those who don't even think about it. There should be an incubator system. Incubator system is simply a system where, okay, you let people create this kind of entrepreneurship or business ideas, and the system enables them. For instance, someone is interested in trading, or someone is interested in manufacturing. Where do you go? What is there? If you want to, these are the things we need. That kind of hub, incubator hubs, where the youth or those who are interested or those who have no knowledge at all can go and get some kind of training. It's not just the formal education to get trained or to get the skill set, but also there should be the enablement. There are other things that makes it possible. There are other things, not just the money, not just the education, but there are tools. There are tools that needs to be implemented that people needs to have as well. So that's all I wanted to add to that.
Thank you very much, Abena, for the wonderful contribution. I think you make good points, especially around, having just beyond the access to capital. You need to have the skill, the mindset and the skills to be able to utilize or leverage on whatever resources you are given. And I think it was part of the ecosystems point, which Adebisi made earlier as well. Having that ecosystem, a lot of things have to work in tandem. And I think that's part of the mindset we are looking to go. I'll just take one more question before I come to you, Doug and Basa. Joe, I think Joe from France, you have your hands raised. You want to make your contribution. Keep it to 2 minutes, please. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you. Go on, Joe.
Oh, thank you, Ken. And good evening to everybody. Good evening to Professor Doug. Unfortunately, I've not been able to talk to him lately because of the COVID. Good evening to Professor Greg Ibeh Yeah, of course. I'm very happy to know that I have this eminent professor from Nigeria, being a former student of Nigeria myself. So, Ken, I want to try to be short. I will try to really synthesize what I wanted to say. Actually, I've had all this discussion about the entrepreneurship and innovation. I want to admit that I'm not an expert of entrepreneurship because I'm not an entrepreneur myself. I'm just a consultant with the IOC UNESCO. But at least we have tried to work on also one or two topics in this regard before. And I just want to stress on the fact that—
Joe, sorry, if you want to speak louder, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can't hear you. Like you seem to be far from your microphone.
Oh, sorry, because I dropped.
Okay, we can hear you now. Go on.
Yeah. It's okay. I dropped the mic. Okay, so I was saying that we have tried to work on some of the topics very close to this kind of topic, like entrepreneurship and innovation as process for development. And if I want to contextualize Africa as a continent, we may also approach Africa as, in terms of subdivisions, like ranging from the community to the country, and maybe a sub-regional framework and the region. So we understand that if we look at entrepreneurship at the different scales, we will not have the same motive. Like at the community level, we may have like the culture, the spirit, regarding the type of knowledge we want to actually pass through to the people, or we want to empower to the people. And as Adebisi said, entrepreneurship is also about the spirit. So we want to attach that spirit to the culture, because the way the communities will approach the business environment, like in Cameroon, for example, will not be the same in Nigeria. If we just want to contextualize, looking at the French, environment from the English environment, and also if we move to the country level, we understand that, of course, governments will have different approaches or policies regarding, their support to entrepreneurship, even regarding the training or the capacity building or development. So, and at this level, I personally want to also understand that government should be able, to actually have this kind of framework that can support the training, also support the loan and the follow-up of the activities of the young entrepreneurs. So at the sub-regional level, I understand sub-regional level, like looking at maybe 2 or 3 countries coming together, or first of all, identifying the type of knowledge that they need, to pass across, the kind of the sector that could actually need, to have the community or the population being educated to, and they can come together and develop a framework that will also help this community to get access to that knowledge, so that at a later time they can actually fly on their own. So, and at the African level, of course, we have the African Union that is always there to provide guidelines on how government or institutions or the various stakeholders could actually be on the side or support some of the initiatives that are being brought in place. When you look at I mean, I'm kind of ocean actor, and Dr. Duke talked about the ocean technology that was also backed up by Professor Greg. So you understand that this is one of the sectors that could actually be of interest to at least the coastal African community, not only the coastal, even the landlocked communities, but at least we need the knowledge in that sector, not that the other sectors like agricultural sector will no longer be important, but we need knowledge in that sector. We don't actually know how to generate electricity. I'm trying to cite Professor Greg, from the waters that we have, because we don't have the technical capacity, we don't have the technical knowledge. So we believe that if the 2 or 3 countries, close to the Congo basin, if they can come together and really bring their own common effort in terms of developing the capacities of their communities regarding such approach, I think it could bear more fruit. And this approach can also be extended, to the regional level, like covering the whole Gulf of Guinea, or maybe the whole of the African Indian Ocean side. So I just try to be brief. Of course, I've gone beyond the 2 minutes, but please, I would have loved to really go into details, but because of the time, I will hand over the speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. Yes, I understand. I think, whenever we start speaking about issues related to the continent, there's so much passion, and, everyone wants to make, tangible contributions. So great job you are doing at the UNESCO as well. So, and I think I like your point, which you made around the, community stroke collective approach in terms of capacity building. So, and I think it's one of those things where, we have to just identify ways to create those connections, those, tiny hubs, work collaborative together, which also ties into the point which Basa made earlier around migration. So we have a few minutes left. What I'm going to do, can we just have like concluding thoughts, what's the way forward? So we probably could keep it to maybe 2 or 3 minutes each. So I'll start off with you, Doug. What do you think? What's the way forward for us, in terms of, from your perspective?
Well, it was a really interesting discussion, and I think there was a lot of agreement on what the steps are, right? So education, that includes education in entrepreneurship and maybe business skills. That's key for our young people. But I think it was said that's just not enough. You also need to have the receptor environment, where those people come out of college or, university or wherever they come from, and some environment or ecosystem or structure where they can establish themselves. And I think Professor Ibeh as well, he said the need for a national plan, need for a plan. You can't just do this randomly. You actually have to have a plan. So all of these, and I think Joe's last point on the regional aspects is really important. I do think many of the issues, so, in our tiny little region, I mean, it's a big geographic region, but very few people of Eastern Canada. We have, followed like many, this cluster idea for economic development, where you identify an area where you think your region can make a difference, and you try to develop a cluster of industries that work with each other to build up strength and hopefully employ young people, So that in the ocean tech idea, I think Joel was sort of hinting at, that's really right for many parts of Africa to do that on a regional scale. Build clusters where entrepreneurs can establish themselves together with bigger companies. One issue with that I've become aware of is in Nova Scotia, here in Canada, the risk is if you do that just locally, just talking amongst yourselves, some good things happen, but it's actually not enough. You need what is in the economic development literature, it's called global pipelines of information and knowledge transfer, where ideas flow back and forth to regions where you maybe get new ideas coming in from outside. A lot of exchange of ideas locally, but you get exposure to new ideas from outside, things that otherwise you may not have thought about. And I think this model could work really well for different regions of the continent. And certainly thinking about it from a Canadian perspective, and Ken and I have had a lot of chats about it, this is not a one-way flow of information. This is a two-way flow of information, because our region is pretty small, and you could just kind of, maybe no new ideas come in. It's obvious there would be new ideas and new challenges coming in to our business community from interactions with people facing similar problems in Africa, but from a different cultural and perspective. I think these global pipelines of knowledge and information exchange between, hopefully, clusters could be or hubs, could be a really good model to move forward and help to ensure that the young people that we hopefully will train in the future with better curricula will have a kind of a vibrant environment to establish themselves in or to become employed in, depending which they want. So I was amazed from this discussion how I think the discussion was pretty converged a lot on some key elements for success, and very, very encouraged by that, and interested to see what my co-panelists feel about it.
Thank you very much, Doug. Global pipelines, that's the way to go. I agree with you. So I'm gonna move over to Mbasa. Mbasa, any closing thoughts?
Hi, Ken. I want to keep it short and sweet. I think what everybody should take, or what at least my thoughts around this whole conversation is that we as entrepreneurs should support upcoming entrepreneurs. It's all great that we say government funding should be available. Government funding is available, but sometimes it's not accessible to everybody because the richer will get richer. So we as current entrepreneurs should provide support, whether in the form of a mentorship or whether in the form of funding. But as people have traveled the path, it's our responsibility also to grow this industry. And it should be part of the objectives going forward to say, we want to catalyze entrepreneurship and economic growth in Africa. And it should be one of the key objectives, part of that plan. Secondly, to any female currently in an industry, we must also understand that support plays a big role, because at the end of the day, we might be childbearing, but we bear children to a nation. So we've got brothers and sisters and husbands who are there to support us through this journey. And also as entrepreneurs, we hold each other's hands and we journey on. So I think that's just, to me, that's just me summing up the session and my takings, and hopefully what other individuals took from the session.
All right, thank you very much, Mbasa. I think great points there. It's imperative that the entrepreneurs support each other, as well as understanding the unique support we need to provide to the females because of some of the challenges, and how are the best ways to address those challenges and those gaps. So before I move on, I've just been sent a message. I think there's someone whose hand has been up, so just so that I don't neglect him. Yes, Imokai, can you just make your contribution in a minute if you can, please, before I just take the concluding thoughts from Adebisi and Professor Greg?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ken, for hosting another interesting discussion. Thank you to the guest speakers, Professor Ibeh and Wallace, and Ms. Javu and Adebisi as well. I appreciate all of your insights collectively. I just wanted to, I wanted to comment previously on some of the points raised, and I think we've talked about building the right, and as Dr. Wallace has correctly summed up, we talked about themes about building the right ecosystems in terms of government involvement and increasing capacity and training and mentorship, as was just mentioned by Ms. Javu. I wanted to touch on something you yourself commented on earlier, Ken, where about this debate that goes on sometimes as to whether or not a lot of the work that's needed in terms of capacity building and stuff lies on the side of government, or whether it lies primarily on the side of the individual or collective entrepreneurs. I think we need all of it. So what I mean by that is, all we have discussed today, the capacity building on the side of the entrepreneurs and how we can best support that, is very valuable and must continue. In addition to this, there are some practical realities that limit what is for each individual entrepreneur. I mean, you can build, train, equip, support, and fund entrepreneurs, but at the end of the day, their business needs to be profitable. And for that to happen, there are certain things that must be in place at the minimum. Nigeria has the capacity to produce nationally about somewhere between 12 and 17 megawatts of electricity. Canada produces 600 terawatts of electricity. So now the federal government almost effectively triple the electricity production. So that is a key thing that they are doing of that sector. But if anybody here is involved in manufacturing, you would find that when you look at your bottom line at the end of the day, and you find that it's slim, you would probably find a big chunk of your expenditure is on providing your own electricity. So having something as basic as that is absolutely critical, in addition to everything that we're doing now. So I know that the government does have the capacity to do things like that and have done in the past. For example, Professor Ibeh, as you talked about Obasanjo's regime, one of the things that came out of that, I'm sure we can all know, those who are Nigerian anyway, the telecommunication and easy access to that has been beneficial to a lot of us and a lot of our businesses. It's easier to get a cell phone and use that for your business or personal than it is in Canada. So businesses, and I think moves that are being made, such as tripling the production as they currently have with Siemens to do over the next, I think, 3 to 4 years. I think moves like that are critical. And I think similar to the part of government, on electricity and similar basic infrastructure would be helpful, in addition to everything we're doing now. So if I should weigh in on that question, or whether it lies more in government or more in individual entrepreneurs, I think both. And I think both are absolutely essential.
All right, thank you very much, Imokai. Great points. I think the infrastructure is really important, and it does affect how sustainable businesses are. So great point. DBC, any concluding thoughts from you before I move to Prof?
Sure. Thank you so much for the conversation we had, and I was really glad and really pleased to share this platform with the other panelists. I think a lot has been said. A few maybe around the moment we are living in, and that will be my closing words. I think that we are living in really strategic time, and a time where there is a lot of shifts that are coming onto the world: economic shift, geopolitical shift, political shift. And I think that all those shifts will probably and certainly help or should make us, okay, the way we are envisioning in Africa our economy, our development, and our society. And taking the conversation from there, I believe that in terms of economic model and in terms of entrepreneurship, we need to reset globally our priorities. That had been said a lot. We need to reset as well, I believe, our really fragile. I think that a lot of policies, a lot of plans, and a lot of paradigm, I believe, we have set so far won't probably be valid for the next 10, 20 years. That's my thought. And I think that there is a momentum to reshift and rethink the way we are planning all those things: economic growth, economic development, development itself, our society, entrepreneurship, innovation, by taking into account the concerns, the fourth revolutions, industrial revolution concern around technology, by taking into account sustainability issues as well. Professor Duke talked a lot about them. It's really, really critical. By also taking into account all the issues, all the resilience issues. And I think that we have the opportunity to rethink the way our societies will move on in a more human-centered and sustainable way. And yeah, first, priorities, one P, priority, second P, policies, and people, the way we center our development, our economy, our entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem in order to take in count and to make people stand of everything. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, DBC. Good points, excellent points. Sustainability in terms of whatever we're doing is very important, and I agree with you. I also like to acknowledge the presence of Ambassador Ikoi, the Honorable Ghanaian Ambassador to Canada, who joined us. I know he reached out to me that he would join towards the end, so thank you for joining us. So I would like to pass it to Professor Greg. Professor, what are your concluding thoughts around the topic today?
Thank you very much. I'm happy the ambassador joined, at least in the way we normally speak. We will use him as a point of contact to all other ambassadors and to the African Union, because I have a role to play. I'm also happy that I met in this platform Professor Wallace. I do know that last week I was called from Nigeria to help one of our elders, Professor Ala-Igbo, set up a university that has to do with maritime and marine education in Nigeria. So I was so excited that I wanted to start the work. He said he wants me to come to Nigeria and brief some of their members that live within the River Rhine. So I believe, Professor Wallace, you give me the opportunity to work with you so that we can have some of your work replicated in further studies in my country, Nigeria. So let me go a little bit on what our roadmap should look like. More of this discussion is required amongst others who have been discussing about issue of entrepreneurship innovation and growth enhanced thinking in our continent. So I believe that we should join the crowd and make further presentation to the regional government and then equally to the African Union on what to do. One thing that everyone should understand is that the lack of planning will lead to nothing. The continent is having a lot of youth activity there, so they should go back and redress the issue of national planning program so that it will enhance the growth. So no country in the continent wants to joke with their GDP. GDP is critical, and anything any president wants to hear is what can improve his or her GDP in Africa. And now that we're more into trouble because there's no roadmap for it. I know that there are roadmaps they will try to implement and they will run away from it. ECOWAS has been dilly-dallying on setting up resource centers, which is an incubation ground, which is a skill acquisition ground, which is an entrepreneurship center. They've been dilly-dallying on it because the formal team were changed to the new group now that doesn't care about entrepreneurship. So we want to get the ambassador to work after this moment to help us with his country to write to the ECOWAS head to implement such programs that have been outlined by the previous bodies in order to deepen centers for entrepreneurship and growth and incubation center across West Africa. So also it will snowball to what we are doing with Africa, ADB. There are a lot of money in ADB to set up these centers, even in South Africa. But we can work on it as a roadmap, and then we'll achieve greatness for our youth, for total emancipation and growth, so far as our continent is concerned. Thank you.
Very much, Prof. It's a good way to end the conversation on a positive note. You know, we've listened to all different perspectives. It's one of those conversations. If we keep going, we'll probably spend the next day or two talking about it. But I think it's a great thing. It's, you know, we're always passionate on how best to move, you know, the continent forward. So I would like to thank all our guest speakers today, Adebisi Jorgan, Professor Gregory Ibeh, Mbasa Javu, and Professor Doug Wallace from Dalhousie University. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I hope the audience, you find it really useful and beneficial. And I think there's a lot of thinking for each one of us in terms of, you know, some of the points which have been highlighted. So if you want to stay tuned to more of the webinars which we'll be having next month, please put put your email in the chat below so that we can capture it and, you know, send you updates.